Hello everyone, I'm the Latino Gamer, bringing you my review of Grandia 3 by Square-Enix. Grandia 3 begins with a young man named Yuki living in the small village of Anfog with his mother Miranda. Yuki's dream is to be a great pilot like his idol, the legendary Schmidt, and thus he spends all his free time with his friend Rots, building and inevitably crashing airplanes. As a result of one of his failed attempts, Yuki and Miranda run into a young communicator on the run named Alfina. Anyone familiar with the grand list of console role-playing game cliches knows that Yuki immediately decides to defend Alfina from any pursuers, since cliche number 3 clearly states, the hero will always be ready to fight to the death for any girl he met 3 seconds ago. As it turns out, communicators are special people who are capable of communicating with guardians, the gods of this world. Alfina must return to her home temple of Arcriff and communicate with their guardian Griff to figure out what has happened to her estranged brother Emilius and why black hole-like vortexes are appearing in the sky. Needless to say, Yuki stubbornly follows Alfina throughout the rest of her journey. RPGs get a lot of criticism at times for their simple gameplay, but I must say that this is where Grandia 3 truly shines. Although the gameplay is still turn-based, it is pretty different from other RPGs. During a battle, every combatant is represented by an icon on the IP wheel. When someone enters the red portion of the wheel, they choose an action, which they then perform when they reach the end of the red portion. The participants of the fights are scattered and move around the battlefield depending on their actions, so attacking a distant target will cause your character to spend time chasing them across the screen. Your characters have several options compared to your typical RPG. In place of the standard attack option, your characters can either perform a 2-hit combo or a single critical hit, which can send an opponent's icon flying about halfway back around the IP wheel if they get hit while in the red portion. Your characters can defend by blocking, thus reducing incoming damage, or choosing to move to a different spot on the field, which can allow you to avoid enemy spells already underway. On top of that, your characters are able to create combos if they attack the same enemy. If one of your characters knocks an enemy into the air with a critical hit, and the enemy is still mid-air when your next character attacks, they will instead leap into the air to perform an air combo. There are also both magic spells and special abilities. Magic spells consume your MP gauge, which begins full and is replenished when your characters are fully healed on the map screen. Special attacks, on the other hand, consume your SP gauge, which begins empty and is typically not refilled for you. You instead receive SP during battle as you perform other actions. This system forces your characters to use a wider variety of moves than your typical Final Fantasy-like skill setup. As Yuki and Alfina continue along their journey, you actually get an interesting mixture of characters to use. There is no real option for switching characters out since the storyline takes care of that for you, but you will usually find yourself with a sufficiently varied party. I cannot help but compare this game to Final Fantasy X due to the similarities in storyline. Your hotshot hero gets lost and just happens to find a woman whose quest will decide the fate of the world as they know it, so he decides to follow along as her protector. Both games also have a short part where you actually take on the role of the woman leading up to an important point in the story. When I first picked up Final Fantasy X, I could not put it down, and it took me years to complete everything that game had to offer. When I first picked up Grandia 3, I fell in love with the unique battle system and could not put it down for weeks, but now it is complete. It does not have as much content compared to a Final Fantasy, but I will say that the combat is far more unique and exhilarating. Your typical RPG fan would probably find Final Fantasy X to be a greater value due to the amount of content, but those who have played a lot of that series will find Grandia 3 to be a refreshing change of pace to our beloved RPG constructs. Even to those of you who do not typically enjoy RPGs, Grandia 3 may be worth a rental if you are curious.
Thank you for listening and happy gaming.